Today we're going to be talking about cybersecurity when working from home. So I just want to start by discussing an overview of this rise in threats. These threats primarily started during COVID when people were forced to work from home, but it's something that's continued to evolve and will continue to evolve as more and more people choose to spend more of their working week within their home environment and not necessarily within a protected office environment. So some of the stats that we've seen that I think are very interesting is the increase in domain registrations that were linked to COVID-19. A 650% increase, showing that attackers and criminals have really grasped COVID-19 as a way to try and compromise individuals and their systems by trying to get people to access websites that have malicious content in order to compromise the machines. See that with the 800% increase in those domains that were created by criminals. Also the increase in phishing attacks. Criminals know that when you work from home, you have less face-to-face communication with your colleagues and more is done over email. And so they're using that as a way, again, to try and compromise you as an individual and your organisation. We've seen that banking malware has increased substantially. Again, criminals know that you're working from home, that you're not having access to your physical bank, and that more of your transactions are done online. And they're targeting that, and they will continue to target that for the foreseeable future. What we're seeing in terms of crimes against corporations and businesses is this rise in ransomware. It's increased tenfold since the start of the year. It's becoming much more sophisticated. It's very lucrative for criminals. And this is a trend that we've seen rise over the last 12 months and is going to increase into the future. At the start of the pandemic, what we saw was increased physical crime against empty offices. Don't expect that to continue as more and more people start spending time in the office, but that theft of devices, the awareness that you need to protect your devices as you're travelling back and forth from home is incredibly important. And the rise in mass botnets, the mass targeting of individuals and organisations has been with us for quite a few years. But we've seen a very significant rise in the last 12 months, and we expect that to continue at least for the next 2 to 3 years. So one of the main ways that attackers are going after individuals and organisations is through phishing. And there's 4 main phishing types of attacks that we've seen that are most relevant. The spear phishing attack, which is very targeted against an individual or an organisation. This is used by more sophisticated criminal gangs or nation states who spend a lot of time trying to understand the organisation, the individual, and the target they're going after, whether it be monetary or information. The CEO fraud, where an attacker is probably within your organisation and mimics the CEO or an executive to try and cause the individual to carry out an action that could lead to some form of business email compromise. And what we're seeing more relevant through the year is social media phishing, so using Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and other social accounts to try and get an individual to carry out some form of action or to download some malware. And finally, home phishing attacks that come through either a phone call to a landline or to a mobile device, normally threatening in nature, so maybe they're saying that they're from the ATO or from the police and try to make you make a payment. So the first 2 things to look out for there are altered invoices, poor spelling and grammar, wrong names, email addresses that don't look quite right, unusual amounts or unusual activity or requests, and trying to get you to carry out an action that's expedient and secretive. All of those are indicators that some of those may well not be legitimate. The piece of advice is, in any doubt, if you think you've been phished, is report it to your security team and validate with the person sending you the request that that's an actual legitimate request from them. We're seeing quite significant losses to organisations through business email compromise or invoice redirection fraud, where the cybercriminal impersonates business or a supplier to try and get fraudulent invoices paid. We see this for a number of reasons. One is that they prey on individuals. They prey on the fact that those individuals want to help and want to be supportive, but they use a lot of psychological tricks in trying to trick the individual. So again, with normal phishing attack, there's a sense of urgency, there's a sense of secrecy. They try to play on people's emotions in order to actually make the payment. And again, what you've got to do in that situation to avoid becoming a victim is to make sure that you have some basic controls in place. So that if you're suspicious at all, contact the person who's requesting the payment and make sure that you do it not through email, but through other means. So phoning them up. If it's in your own company, then walking around and have a conversation with them just to validate that it's true. And again, if you are suspicious, it's better to report it and not make the payment. than it is to make the payment and lose the money. So when you're working from home, there's some basic steps you can take to protect yourself and your family. Make sure that you have the latest antivirus software on your own devices. So that's not so much relevant to your corporate device because your IT departments will have installed the latest antivirus and it will be updated and patched. But we know that people working from home interchange their personal devices and their work devices to do mobile banking and finances, access to all of the sites that they use for online shopping that could lead to loss. So make sure that it's not just your corporate devices that are updated with the latest antivirus, but also your personal devices and those of your family. Don't let your family members use your work laptop for personal reasons. Children use work laptops to look at all of their sites. Criminal gangs know the types of sites that kids look at, the types of games they play, and they can use those sites that are more or less insecure to sort of target your work laptop. And once that's compromised, then there's the opportunity for the attacker then to launch further attacks against your organization. If you're not using your webcam, if you're not on a meeting, then make sure that you have a cover and make sure that your microphone's off. A lot of attacks have occurred because criminals can eavesdrop. They can access your webcam, they can access your microphone. Even if you're having a personal conversation, then that can be overheard. And if you're accessing your corporate environment, make sure that you're always using your corporate VPN. And it's always a good idea to have a VPN on your personal devices as well. VPNs are a very cheap way to make sure that none of your communications between yourself, your bank can be eavesdropped by an individual, especially if you're out and about and you're using public Wi-Fi. One of the things that you should really be taking care of is looking at your Wi-Fi devices at home. A lot of the devices are actually shipped with generic usernames and passwords, and you want to make sure that you change those details as soon as possible. And also the identifier for the Wi-Fi is anonymized, so it doesn't give away your name, location, address, and making it much more difficult for anybody who is trying to look at open Wi-Fi networks to identify who you are. Making sure that when you're on video conferences that you password protect if you're the host so that not anybody can join the conference. I mean, we've seen earlier on in the year where certain video conference systems had been compromised, which led to exposure of user credentials and unauthorized individuals accessing conferences that they shouldn't have been able to attend. And making sure that you've got strong passwords across all of your accounts. One of the easiest ways to do this is to get a password manager, making sure that you've got a unique password for every account that you access so that if you do become a victim of a breach and one credential is compromised, then that same credential can't be used to access other sites or services that you use online. And finally, if you are suspicious of emails, then make sure that you don't open it, or if it's on your corporate device, that you report it to your security team. One of the easiest ways for attackers to put malware on your devices is to fill you into clicking on a link in an email, which will download malware, which will then lead to further attacks against you or your organisation. I hope you've found these brief insights informative. If you want to find out more information, then please visit us at Aon.